Hello, my name is Michael Tessera and I prepared this ACCC cheat sheet for February 2026. And if you haven't seen one before, the plan is to sort of summarise all the ACCC developments in this particular month and save you a bit of time from reading all those media releases. As you can see, I've fallen behind it again, 4th of May, so hopefully I'll be able to catch up in the next couple of weeks. Now, bit of background about myself. I'm a competition and consumer lawyer. I've run my own practice to Legal Consulting for the last 18 or so years, and I help companies and individuals with competition and consumer law problems. Do a bit of expert consultancy work for various legal publishers on competition consumer law. I also have a part-time role as general member of New South Wales Civil Administrative Tribunal, where I do a range of different things, do a lot of tenancy matters, but also a fair few Australian consumer law matters. And the previous place I worked was the ACCC. I was there for 15 years and worked in a variety of areas, including enforcement and mergers. Outline's a bit different to usual. The priorities, ACCC priorities came out in February. So I'll go through that in a bit of detail. Courts, one court case, limited bit of enforcement, one scam announcement, a little bit of work in inquiries and authorisations. Now, as I said, the priorities came out in February. That's the way it generally happens every year. And the 9th of February, the announcement was made, and the 2026-2027 priorities were announced. I guess the thing about the priorities is they have to be seen in the context of the objects of the legislation. And so all of the ACCC's enforcement activity is directed at achieving one of those three goals: promoting competition amongst businesses, promoting fair trading by businesses, and protecting consumers and then dealing with businesses. So that's really all the enforcement has to be directed to achieving those broad objects of the legislation. Now, the reason they have priorities is because they get a lot of calls and complaints from consumers. As you can see there, they got 334,000 in the last financial year. They recorded a lot of those in database and take out 225,000 relating to scams. So it leaves 102,000 which are non-scam related cases. So they've got to try and work out which of those cases are they going to pursue. Obviously, a lot of the scams they do pursue, but also how many of those non-scam related contacts are they going to pursue. So there's a big process of prioritising and working out what they should take on. Now, this is a document they had in earlier annual report from a few years ago, and for some reason they haven't duplicated it in subsequent annual reports, but I think it's very helpful. It shows how cases have progressed through the ACCC system, and this is both consumer and competition cases. So back then they assessed 254 cases as being of interest, and some of those 254 might be multiple complaints about a trader, so there might be 100 complaints about a particular trader. So 254 is not the number of complaints, it's the number of cases. And ordinarily there'd be multiple complaints about a lot of these cases. Then they commence an initial investigation in 157 of them. So they look at 254 and 157 they do something. And that might be a letter to the trader asking for more information, a letter to the complainant asking for more information. So they're doing some preliminary legwork, and this is really at the office level. It hasn't got the commissioners involved yet. Once they've done that initial investigation, it culls down to 68 in-depth investigations. So this is when they're actually staff reporting to the commissioners saying, hey, we've got this case, it's important because it does X, Y, and Z, a lot of detriment to consumers. What we need is you to give the go-ahead that we conduct an in-depth investigation, and also maybe some money is allocated to the case. So it might be to get some lawyers involved, maybe a decision to issue notices, compulsory notice on the 155. So effectively, this is when the organisation is committing resources to pursuing the case. And of that 68, 15 end up in litigation. But that doesn't tell the full story because a lot of cases aren't litigated. So here are the most recent figures, 24, 25 from the annual report. And it shows in that particular year they had 40 formal outcomes. So as you can see, the number of in-depth investigations, a large proportion of those actually end up with an outcome. As you see, there was a lot of litigation actually in 2024-25. 17 new cases were commenced, which is a bit higher than usual, but they got, 5 enforcement-related 87B undertakings. They got a lot of other undertakings, but obviously mergers and other areas, but these were enforcement ones. They issued infringement notices against 16 companies. So a lot of those companies got more than one. They probably got up to 4 or 5 in some cases, but that's how many separate companies were hit with an infringement notice. And then one company, this was Getty Images, it signed an administrative undertaking, which is somewhat unusual, but not a bad way to resolve matters. So as you can see, of the matters that hit in-depth investigation phase, 39 formal outcomes were achieved by the ACCC. So I guess the message there is that if you get to an in-depth investigation stage, there's a very high probability that you'll be expected to either do something or the ACCC will take some action against you by taking you to court. That's important to realise. So the 2026-27 priorities, a lot of them are pretty similar to previous years, and that's because the issues have continued, obviously, in the market. So a lot of focus on supermarket retail sectors, and this is both market power and conduct that impacts small business. So they're worried about the supermarkets using their power as a buyer of goods and services, also acquisitions. So that's a big focus of their activity. Consumer and fair trading concerns in supermarket and retail sectors with a focus on misleading pricing practices. And I guess everybody knows that the Woolworths and Coles cases have been through the courts recently, and ACCC is alleging that their various price discounts promotions were misleading, and the theory is that they're effectively putting prices up and then discounting them, and that's misleading to consumers. And I think it pretty well is actually. If you've ever gone shopping, and I don't know how many of the judges do go shopping, I don't think Justice O'Brien goes shopping very often by the sounds of it, but you're faced with thousands of products, and you don't want to spend hours in the store, so you're quickly looking for any cheat sheets, effectively, to try and find the cheapest products, and you're very guided by these down and other price representations, and you think to yourself, okay, I don't have to look at these 60 products on the shelf here. I don't have to look at the unit price measurement for 60 products. I can just look out for these, as I said, cheat sheet to tell me this is a real good saving. And so that's why people buy those products, and they're not thinking that this product previously was higher, in some cases significantly higher, and in more recent times has been discounted from a higher price. So I don't think people think that. Anyway, we'll see how the cases pan out, but I have a strong view to breach. I don't know whether the judge will understand the case well enough to find that. Next one, promoting competition in essential services with a focus on telecommunications, electricity and gas. It's sort of limited what they can do there, really. Like these are highly regulated industries, but to promote competition, you really need new entry. And I don't know what the ACCC can do about fostering new entry to these markets. Misleading pricing and claims in relation to essential services, energy and telecommunications. Again, heavily regulated, taking a lot of enforcement action against energy and telecommunications companies which mislead consumers. And it's very competitive at the retail level. People making offers, and they often do exaggerate the benefits to consumers. Competition and consumer issues in the aviation sector. It's again hard to see what they can do in relation to competition in that sector. Really, I don't think there's going to be much new entry. There's very little competition in the market at the moment. Virgin and Qantas are operating a classic duopoly at the moment, and so I don't know what they can really do there. I guess the consumer issues came up with the Qantas case, and there's also a proposal now to bring in an aviation ombudsman who will be hopefully given power to resolve consumer disputes. So that's a good development, and something that will probably take a lot of work off the ACCC table in the first instance. Manipulative and false practices and unsafe consumer goods in digital markets. That's a big category. Looking at the new unfair trading practices laws, which talk about subscription traps and dark patterns and all the rest of it, but also a lot of unsafe products being sold online, often by less reputable providers. So this is a big area of activity. Promoting competition in digital markets. Obviously, the ACCC has recommended specific codes for different digital services, and the government seems to be very wishy-washy on this. They seem to, ignore it, and they like it, and they ignore it. Really not too sure what's happening there. I don't know why Albanese hasn't got stuck into that recommendation earlier. You can only speculate. He's a bit concerned about what the reaction may be from Trump administration if we start passing laws that cramp the style of digital market players. The problem is digital market players have a huge amount of power in markets, and they're getting caught out all over the world for breaching, including in Australia, for using this market power in ways that is illegal. So I don't think there's ever any doubt there's a need to regulate here. It's just unfortunately it seems to be a bit of fear about retaliation by another administration. Consumer and fair trading concerns in relation to environmental claims and sustainability with the focus on greenwashing. So that's been there for a few years now. Probably one that should be an enduring priority, really, but ACCC is very vigilant in that area. Unfair contract terms, and this is very quite specific when you think about it. Harmful cancellation terms, automatic renewals, early termination fee clauses, and non-cancellation clauses. So it's clearly looking very closely at these particular provisions, and I guess now it's a penalty provision. You can get very big penalties. Actually, I think it's 100 million now. They've increased the penalties recently. So it's something business have to be very conscious of, because it's easy to make a mistake, and now you can actually get fined. Improving industry compliance with consumer guarantees, which are focused on motor vehicles. It is disappointing that the consumer guarantee laws have been around for so long and people don't seem to want to abide by them. There are often cases where there's clearly major failures with motor vehicles, and they just won't give the consumer the remedies that they're entitled to. I guess it's fair to say a lot of cases go to final hearing at NCAT on motor vehicle matters. There are also some proposed changes to the consumer guarantee laws, which I think have got through Treasury and I think are going to come in, and they're going to make it less consumer friendly. And that's obviously something that the ACCC will have to bear in mind with its priority here when these new laws come in. But at the moment, the law is very consumer friendly, and I think traders just have to accept that's the fact and comply. Consumer safety issues with young children, button battery, infant sleep, toppling furniture. Clearly, there's been a huge amount of activity with button batteries recently, including one of my clients, the Wiggles, and also Hungry Jacks. So there's been a lot of activity there, and that's going to continue. It isn't that hard a standard to comply with, I don't think. So people just have to be very vigilant with those issues. And then you've got your enduring priorities. So these will always be important to the ACCC, and they also make sense. Cartel conduct, they're very focused on that conduct. A lot of attempts over the last few years, and obviously the big penalties being applied to attempts, but there are actually a few real live cartels being pursued by the ACCC at the moment. Anti-competitive conduct generally, exclusive dealing, misuse of market power, and I was looking for those cases. Product safety is a really high priority for the ACCC. They're really often overperforming in terms of the number of cases they take in that area. Obviously, it makes sense to be helping customers who are vulnerable, disadvantaged, and this is very much focused on maybe older Australians, people in the NDIS, so vulnerable people there, First Nations people, non-English-speaking background. So I guess a case comes forward and it's involving vulnerable consumer, it's going to get much more attention from the ACCC than some other cases. Also First Nations Australians, and still remains a lot of very negative conduct towards First Nations Australians in rural communities. I think you saw the Optus case where a lot of First Nations Australians were being ripped off and sold products that they didn't need, couldn't afford, in some cases couldn't even use. Small business and agriculture, it's funny they get put together actually, but small business as a criteria and agricultural codes, so they're very important issues. I guess there's been a huge amount of activity in relation to a number of the codes. I think the horticulture code, there's been a lot of activity, so they're making sure that people comply with that particular code. Less so in relation to the dairy area. And just, I guess, in terms of small business competition, it's hard to see what they can really do there. But I guess preventing large players from using the market power to hurt small business is probably the big criteria. And finally, scams, which probably always should have been enduring criteria or enduring priority, but now it's specifically there. And the Scams Protection Network framework, which is coming in, it's going to be very prescriptive. It doesn't look like it's going to be super easy to comply with, but it comes in the big end of town. So an extra thing people have to comply with just to, I guess, implement a number of mechanisms to try and protect consumers. And in this regard, we're probably well behind a lot of the rest of the world with our scam protection. Now, that's the priorities. I guess with the priorities, the ACCC will spend a lot of their money trying to meet those priorities. And so if you're in one of those categories, you can expect some attention from the ACCC one way or another. They are very likely to focus their activities on the things they say they will focus their activities on, and actually report in their annual report on how they've gone against those priorities. Okay. One court case, Mobile All Australia, and this was a funny one. The company admitted that it made representation. Sounds like a stuff up. They made a real big mistake. False and misleading claims to consumers about branding and signage which indicated the fuel being sold was a particular mobile Synergy fuel. The problem was that at these particular sites, that fuel was not available, and the fuel being sold was just the normal fuel they sell at their sites. So it clearly was a false representation, and they're saying things: protect your energy from the first fill, contain certain additives designed to improve your engine performance, which they didn't contain, and help to remove harmful deposits from vital engine parts. Again, it was the wrong fuel. So stuff up, 16 million sounds fair enough for that. I guess the question I ask is, can this fuel, if it had been sold, actually achieve all these outcomes? I've been a bit sceptical about that, but it didn't arise for this particular case because these particular fuel sites didn't sell the Synergy fuel anyway. So here are the representations, and they're just, I don't know, they seem pretty extravagant to me. Protects and cleans your engine from the first fill. Removes harmful engine deposit. Peak engine performance. Enhances fuel economy. Lots of representations. Gee, I'd be interested in the substantiation for all those things, but anyway, that might be a case for another day. One enforcement matter, Drone TK Australia, so Techron, a very small company by the sounds of it, engaged in some resale price maintenance. It admitted to it. It sells drones for agricultural consumers, and between 24 and 25, about close to over a year there, included terms and agreements requiring them to sell their products at prices set by Techron, so a pretty clear case of resale price maintenance. Techron also communicated these prices to resellers as being the minimum recommended retail price below which they were not permitted to sell their products, and in one case they pretty well threatened a reseller. So this is very common at the smaller end of the market. A lot of small companies don't understand this law, and I guess the ACCC is taking a sensible approach, doesn't want to take all these guys to court and drive them out of business. So it's getting undertakings, don't do it again, and it's a sensible way forward. There was a scams report issued in February, on the 5th of February, and it's its final quarter scam statistics, and what it showed was an increase in romance scams. And it's probably one of the worst type of scams because it doesn't really prey on people's, emotions and vulnerabilities. But I guess here what you're seeing is $28.6 million in financial losses, and it's a 20% increase. So that's really concerning that it's going up so much, particularly with so much education and information in the markets. It's just seemed to be growing, and I think the reason for that is that these are scams which generate a lot of return per consumer. So I think if you're a scammer, you can see if you pull off a few successful romance scams, you're going to make a lot of money. And they had this romance scammers, I guess, what to look for, how it operates. Obviously, creating a fast emotional bond, being attentive, understanding, affectionate, moving conversations off regulated or monitored platforms. So they often go off to encrypted platforms, WeChat, and various things like that. So that makes it hard to detect what's going on. Avoid in-person contact because the person who's on the other side of the communication is often not the person you believe it is. Then maybe introduce a financial request, sometimes a small one, small amount of money, and asking for money in particular ways it's hard to track, like cryptocurrency, gift cards, and then slowly increasing the amount sought and sort of making quite direct threats about applying pressure. Secrecy is really important. Don't talk to other people. So, and sometimes a bit of element of blackmail too. If somebody is getting involved with somebody and they have in a relationship, sometimes they use that to blackmail the person to get more money. Inquiries consultation, the first one, the NDIS, and there was this task force set up. ACCC sort of runs it, and I think they were more surprised than anybody they were put in charge of that. And it includes also the National Disability Insurance Agency and the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission. So the three of them formed the task force, and they put out a report on the 10th of February, basically saying that there's a lot of problems with NDIS, which doesn't come as a big surprise to people. They believe that participants are being targeted by certain providers with deceptive advertising practices and other behaviours banned by the consumer law. And for example, wrongly charging for essential disability supports that were not supplied as agreed, falsely claiming services are NDIS approved or eligible for funding, which isn't the way it works. They credit NDIS providers, but not products or services. And they identified the types of issues they're concerned about: false and misleading conduct, not honouring consumer guarantees, so not giving people refunds when products and services aren't up to scratch, issuing contracts and failing to provide clear written details of the terms or including unfair terms, not providing for goods that are supplied or delaying supply, specific misrepresentations about specialist disability accommodation, and also impacts on various NDIS participants, both First Nations and other people. So I guess we've heard since then that the NDIS is costing a vast amount of money. There's big changes proposed, but I guess squeezing out the unscrupulous operators for the market is a really important aspect of it, and the ACCC has been very vigilant and has done a number of cases, high-profile cases in this area, so that's good. Another thing that's really not that interesting, I think, is that Australia Post is continuing to ask for price increases because it has a monopoly in relation to these particular types of letters, small, large, and larger letters, and it can't make any money. So it's got to keep increasing the price. And it's a funny process. It goes to ACCC. ACCC does a bit of inquiry, seeks comments, and then makes a recommendation to the minister, and the minister decides. So the minister can do whatever she wants in relation to these issues. But it's a long process, and it seems forever Australia Post requests for price increases seem to be always something up on the ACCC website about this. Then two authorisations: organic waste by a refinery. So this was something that the ACCC was proposing to authorise and now has decided to grant a final determination. And effectively these four organisations, three councils and City Water, want to get together to basically go about setting up an organic waste biorefinery in southwestern Sydney. So this is something that going to cost a lot of money. Effectively, there's a theoretical risk that this could be seen as anti-competitive conduct. The fact that they're all getting together to approach suppliers to give them prices for the various elements needed to create this organic waste biorefinery, and so they need that protection from possible action for cartel behaviour. And the ACCC thought this has got a high public benefit. Because fundamentally, it's not going to get built unless these four companies or four organisations can underwrite it. And what they're allowed to do is to jointly evaluate requested proposals for the manufacture or the development of the biorefinery, collectively negotiate non-exclusive long-term supply agreements. So that's where the cartel activity is a risk, and then enter and give effect to those agreements. So that's obviously a risk as well. So a high public benefit, and you see a lot of these authorisations in the waste area because there's significant public benefits, not just in environmental terms, but in terms of reduced costs, reduced transaction costs. It's efficient to let people get together to do this. And the other one was a very kind of a similar proposal, but this is at an earlier stage. So it's talking about City of Newcastle and Port Stephens Council want to get together to effectively enter into contracts for the provision of food and garden organics, or FOGO, processing services. So that's ACCC is proposing to allow this, seeking some comments, and again, big public benefits here. It'd be more efficiently delivered if the two councils can do it together. There's big scale benefits, scale economy benefits there. So you'd think that'd get through. So that's all that's for February. I guess the big thing is the priorities, and so it's good for companies to be aware what the priorities are. I guess not a whole lot of surprises. It's sort of the same entities or same areas that you'd assume earlier. So I guess one thing that's been commented on is a bit of a concern with appliance manufacturers not honouring consumer guarantees. That wasn't specifically mentioned in the priorities, but the ACCC issued something subsequent to that. So the ACCC very good in telegraphing to the business community what they are going to be looking at. So there's no excuses not to know what the ACCC is looking at. Mobile case was a pretty dumb case, really, when you think about it. Like, Mobile made a big mistake, and you just wonder how chaotic things must be in the organisation to make such a major mistake and not to pick it up quickly. 16 million, some people might think that's a bit harsh for such a mistake, but I think, what was the consequences of their conduct? Like, did these 9 fuel sites get a lot more business because people thought they were getting this super duper fuel? Like, you just don't know. And so to the extent that their conduct was incompetent, it might have also reaped them a lot of financial benefit at the expense of competitors who weren't breaking the law, So that's to bear that in mind, and I think that's a pretty fair outcome. Romance scams is concerning. There's so much publicity about it, but it doesn't seem to be having an impact. The number of amount of money being lost is rising, and so I don't really know what can happen there. I guess really sometimes you can't protect people, so all you can really do, you can't protect people by educating them. The only way you can do is try and disrupt the scams, which is very hard because they pop up so quickly and very hard to detect. And the NDIS is a big concern. Like, I think there's been a lot of talk about unscrupulous providers, and the ACCC has been very good in identifying some of those providers and drawing attention to them. But you just have a feeling that it's the tip of the iceberg, and really on the accreditation side and audit side, maybe more has to happen there, because enforcement's a really blunt instrument in terms of trying to stop bad conduct. So you really got to be, regularly auditing providers and making sure if they can't meet the compliance requirements, they lose their accreditation. So that's all I had. Hopefully that's been helpful. And as I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. Otherwise, you can look forward to the March instalment in the next week or so. Thank you. Bye-bye.